All righty, let's get right into it. All guests on 95.7 The Game appear on the River Islands guest line. Isn't it time for you to discover the islands, River Islands in Lathrop? Let's welcome in Anthony Slater of ESPN. Covers the Golden State Warriors when they are playing. And I think I saw him in Denver the other day. What's up, Anthony? How you doing, man?
I'm a little tired. It was an 8:30 tip in Denver last night. Bunch of fouls. We didn't get out of the arena till like 1 or something.
Well,
Slate's working hard.
Hang in there, buddy.
Yeah.
You know, have fun in Minneapolis. I can tell you some places to go there. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. Hey, let's get into the Warriors. How long do you think before we know about, the Steve Kerr decision? And let me ask you this. How much of it do you think is his decision at this point?
Timeline-wise, I think Steve was pretty transparent about, 1 to 2 weeks. And he said that Friday. So we're talking 1 week would be this Friday, 2 weeks, obviously the following one, I think somewhere like in that pocket. I think important conversations will be had in the middle to later part of this week. As far as how much it is his decision, I think he's checking the box number one of do you want to be back or do you not? Like he's like kind of the first domino within the decision. Like he has to make the choice that he wants to, but then, it'll be collective. And when I say collective, I'm talking Steve Kerr, Mike Dunleavy, Joe Lacob, Kirk Lacob, discussing plenty of topics on the future and direction of the franchise. And then it'll have to be a collective decision. To your point, it's not just a Steve Kerr choice.
Slates, you cover this team inside out, man. I was just telling Steiny and the listeners, it's day 4 of the playoffs. I'm stunned that this season ended the way it did. And there are reasons. But if I asked you how shocked you are about what happened with this Warriors season in totality, how would you answer that?
Jimmy Butler tore his ACL in January. I was there that night. Obviously, I remember kind of being right in the tunnel when they were carrying him off. And I had the thought at that moment that this season had changed. It was the second best player's $54 million guy on a team that was already kind of top heavy, right? Among teams that have, 2 stars, he was, on a team that they were most reliant on those top 2 stars. So in the West, I think right then you knew they were at minimum a play-in team. They were lucky that, if you want to say lucky, but 5 teams tanked under them, so it just locked them into 10th. But I didn't really predict going back to January, February that they were going to last past the Friday of play-in week, because without Jimmy Butler and with a hobbled Steph Curry, which he was, as we all know, I don't think they were a top 8 team in the West.
Anthony Slater joining us on 95.7 The Game, writes for ESPN, covers the Golden State Warriors and the NBA. I'm trying to put some tea leaves together, and I'm just wondering, did you happen to see when Draymond got ejected Friday night that Mike Dunleavy was standing in the tunnel at the time of the ejection?
Yeah, I was actually in the tunnel down there because, you love it, especially late in the year, to see the kind of like the walk-off and the interactions and all that. So, yeah, I was down there right in that mix, and Draymond just got, a 90-second head start for everybody.
Yeah, anyway, maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of it, but I thought Mike Dunleavy basically ignored him when he was walking by. And then I just got to think, you obviously reported a few days ago that Dunleavy got an extension maybe a couple months ago. And I was just thinking, Draymond was, I thought he was pretty shook at the trade deadline when he thought his name was brought up. And I'm wondering if Draymond Green doesn't think that Mike Dunleavy may be open to moving him. And that's one of the things going on here when Draymond talks about wanting to be back and not wanting to retire, et cetera.
Yeah, Draymond Green's name was brought up at the deadline in the honest talks, and obviously if the Warriors go big fish hunting this offseason, especially now that Kuminga's contract out the door and you don't know what you can do with the Porzingis signing trade or not. Like, Draymond Green's contract is more needed if you are going to go down the Giannis, the Kawhi, salary hunting. So there is an understandable level of unease from Draymond. I do agree with you that the trade deadline, I mean, he's talked about it. It did unsettle him. The one thing I'll say, and we reported it in our story this week, and I could say going back to all my conversations with management post-deadline, they've pushed back against the idea that, they're trying to move off Draymond, or even at the deadline they were shopping him around. He is an understandable salary that they may have to move, but also that, they're voicing to me a desire to still, keep him around long term. If a decline in multi-year extend would help them financially, get other pieces in the door this summer, they're open to that. So in no ways do I think Draymond Green's future is decided with the Warriors one way or the other. I do agree that if Steve Kerr leaves, you could see much more of a sea change organizationally, which I think would make Draymond more vulnerable. But I don't think Draymond believes that management is actively trying to push him out.
Slater, let me ask you this, because I got to be careful. It's a big if, but if this team, the Golden State Warriors, were to make a change at the head coaching position, I know you have Steph and Dre and Jimmy coming off injury, but your honest assessment, how attractive is this team right now with everything, the books, the players? How would you respond to that?
I mean, they're a big brand team. They have an owner who's going to spend, which, look at Portland right now. How appealing would that Portland situation be with the owner won't even get, the reports are around like $1.5–2 million for the head coach, obviously all the cost cutting stuff he's doing. So there are aspects of the Warriors that should appeal to a coach that is willing to step in and build with the Warriors, because they're certainly a build. They're not Mike Brown took the Knicks job this summer, right? And that was hey, come in, you have a contending roster, but there's pressures that come with that. Mike Brown's already, after last night, feeling like he's in hot water. Whereas if you come in like a Jordy Fernandez to Brooklyn, for example, the Nets have not won the last couple of years, but he came in as a young head coach who, has a great reputation across the league, and he was in alignment with Sean Marks, and it was like, hey, let's build. And he just got an extension, this week, despite the season they've had. So I think it is an appealing job for a certain type of coach, and I'm probably talking about a younger, build-it-up type coach. But that's not the weird part is the transition the Warriors are in. I mean, you guys talk about it every day. We all know they seem ripe for a rebuild, but at the same time, because of how good Steph Curry still is and who he still is to the franchise, they kind of still have to be protective of the final few years of Steph Curry's career. So they're a little bit caught in the middle where that makes sense more for a veteran coach. And to be honest, that makes sense more for Steve Kerr to be coaching. But at the same time, if you take a broader look at their situation, it would kind of make sense for like a younger build-it-up type coach.
Yeah, Anthony Slater joining us on 95.7 The Game, works for ESPN, covers the Golden State Warriors. In the wake of that loss Friday, Steph Curry said, he wants a contract extension. And when he said multiple, that means more than two. I didn't know if that meant tack one more on the end of the one that's already existing for two, or two more after this one. In any event, what does a Steph Curry extension even look like?
Yeah, so it's the over 38 rule, so he can do a max of 2-year extension, and or could just tack one. So it's either just one or two. Look, the conversation begins with a max. He's still a all NBA type of talent. I do think that how this summer goes, the direction, which obviously is very undecided at this point, and what they can and can't get done this summer could, dictate where, stuff should go with even Steph's money long term. If, I think some people wonder, hey, is it possible if he takes a little bit of a pay cut, could that help them, build up the roster in his final seasons? Possibly, but Steph doesn't know those answers yet. The Warriors management does not know those answers yet, and that's why I expect a Steph extension conversation to happen more in the, late July, August, September type of range, because there's so many questions to answer before then that I think would dictate what would make most sense for Steph.
What would you make of Pods' year? A lot, from the fan base is a lot of hate, and I don't think it's deserved, but in totality, how would you assess his year?
Yeah, I mean, I think durability was a big bonus from him. 82 games. I think, only 19 players across the league played all 82. I think it was some learning lessons for him, not only from just like kind of, his media communication, but also like what he is and isn't as a scorer. I think there were at times, when Steph was out or when this team needed more creation and scoring and star level offensive talent, he maybe fell short a little bit, where I think in a lot of ways he's still doing a lot of the glue role player type stuff that can get you paid in the league, and that'll be the next thing with him, extension talks. But I think he's at 19. He's very obviously a value pick, a pick that they got right. But as you look towards the future, it's a little bit more about the acceptance of him of what he should be in the NBA, and also an acceptance probably from the Warriors that, it's fine to have, his ceiling be high-level role player, because that's where I think it's kind of going.
Anthony Slater joining us on 95.7 The Game. He covers the Golden State Warriors for ESPN. Where do you think things are headed toward for Porzingis and the Warriors?
I think that it could matter what else the Warriors can or can't get done, and for two reasons. Number one, if they use a lot of their, financial tools to go elsewhere, then Porzingis has to search elsewhere himself. But also, he could be, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but, he is the salary slot. They traded remember Kuminga's salary slot was basically held on to theoretically use in a trade. It was used in the Porzingis trade as an expiring, which felt like maybe they were trying to get off the money. But at the same time, if they find something this summer where you want to try to find some building blocks, in conjunction with Porzingis, who would have to sign off on it because he's an unrestricted free agent, he could be used in a sign and trade to help get that done. So I think a lot of conversation need to be had, and including the possibility that at, a smaller number than the 30.7 that he walked out on, like he could come back. Like we all saw the fit at times when he was healthy and he was on the floor. Obviously that remains a big if, but if you get him at a decent number, he still provides a lot on certain nights.
Speaking of conversation, Anthony, this might not be fair, but I know you're around the team, and once a week I tell Steiny, man, I wonder what Joe Lacob is thinking. Do you have any feel to how the owner is feeling just about his team and where they're at and what's going on? Because I was at a few games and I always have fun with the Joe Lacob meter from my eyes. And I'm like, even when they're on a run, I just, I don't see him jumping up and down. I'm like, I just wonder what he feels about his team he's running. What do you think old Joe Lacob is feeling about this season and the direction they're headed?
I mean, look, they just paid, $67 million in luxury tax, I think it was. I mean, they're obviously one of the highest salary rosters in the league, and they won 37 games. They were 10th in the West. They didn't make the playoffs. I saw him walking out of the arena, try to chat it up with him a little bit after the Suns lost, and he was scooting out, in a pretty frustrated way, which is understandable. I mean, he wants to win. He's paying to win, but also, typically when you get him in, his more thoughtful moments, he's realistic about the hows and the whys of where the season got to, and he understands the injury troubles that this team went through. I think he understands the age and some of the dynamics at play. So they are certainly over the next week, 2 weeks, going to figure out what the proper direction to get this thing a little bit more back on track and to where they're a more consistent, obvious playoff team. But, I don't think he's rattling the table saying everything needs to be torn down.
What do we know about the lottery and the Warriors and their scouting staff? They're going to have, the highest pick they've had since Kuminga, I think? Moody.
Yeah, I should say
Kuminga. Yeah, I'm assuming.
Moody was 14, so you're right. It would be Kuminga.
So they obviously this is supposed to be a heck of a draft. If they get 11, they have an opportunity to get a real good player. Any sense of what they'd be looking at position-wise?
Yeah, well, I'd say a few things. Like, they've been scouting this draft all year. I mean, most people, most front offices in the NBA have, especially college this year was so good, right? I mean, the top 11, this isn't one of those drafts where it's a bunch of international guys up top. Although, Mike Dunleavy actually did near the deadline go to out to New Zealand and watch a couple potential first rounders out there. But they have a pretty long, I guess, scout staff, obviously led by Larry Harris, who lives in the Dallas area, and they're doing a lot of work on these guys. And this is a huge pick for the franchise. Obviously, we'll know come May 10th if there's a 9.4% chance it's in the top 4. And if it jumps up there, I think that changes a lot, right? Like Dallas was in this exact position last year, and they felt in a very unsettled place franchise-wise, and obviously they ended up firing their GM and everything like that. But the fact that they jumped up and got Cooper Flagg, that changed so much for their franchise. So, number one, you got to wait for that on May 10th. And then other than that, like as far as positionally, what do they need? I mean, wings, right? Look, they came into the year with 3, you would say starting caliber wings or rotation level wings, and I'm talking Kuminga, Butler, and Moses Moody.
Yeah.
Traded one away. The other 2 got knee injuries that are going to impact a majority of their season next year. Like they are just depleted on the wing. So, you kind of got to, at this point, I'm not sure you could just say you have to. It's the whole, drafting need over just best player available. But if they can find a good, wing, like it's clear that's what this roster needs.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, thanks a lot for joining us. I know you're probably on your way to Minnesota, so appreciate you squeezing us in, man.
All right, fellas.
All right. That's Anthony Slater of ESPN.